What's up everyone, I'm Matt Martin with The Grass Factor, and today I am taking your rear to school. Stick around because in this video, what we're specifically going to talk about is number one, lime. Understanding the score, the value of lime you receive on your soil test. Number two, what are the appropriate products you can use to correct your soil pH? And number three, how much of those products should you be putting out for lasting effect over your soil pH? Stick around, we've got a lot to cover. Okay, so you got your soil test back, like this one right here, and it shows you have a pH of 7, a pH of 6.5, a pH of 6.3. Not a lot to worry about, but what if you get a soil test back like this one that shows you have a pH of 4.7? Well, conventional wisdom, conventional gardening, conventional turf management, no matter how you spin it, the answer is you need to apply lime. Okay, you know you need to apply lime, but how much lime do you need to apply? Now, some soil tests like this one from Spectrum Analytics I'm looking at here says specifically on it, the recommendation is one, we're going to be using dolomitic lime. And the reason why this recommends dolomitic lime is because the soil test indicates it's actually low in both calcium and magnesium. Therefore, a dolomitic lime, which is a combination of CaCO3 and MgCO3, would supply both those nutrients. And it tells you you should apply 46 pounds of dolomitic lime per 1,000 square feet. And that is to move your soil pH of a 5.6 up to an optimal 6 to 6.8. But that's not always the case. For instance, this soil test I have here, which is from Soil Savvy, it does not specifically state how much lime should you apply, but it does give you a pH value of 4.7. So where do you begin? Now, to accurately calculate exactly how much lime you need, there's quite a bit of testing involved with it. Specifically, you have to use an equation deriving your lime buffering capacity of your soil and a series of complex math problems to come up with the specific value. Basically, you use your target pH, what your current pH is, you multiply it by a couple of different factors, and it would spit out exactly how much CaCO3 you would need to buffer your soil. Now, because some soil tests don't provide you with those values, it would be impossible without a chemistry set for you to determine that on your own. So as a general guideline, one of the things you can use is a chart like this. So if you can make the determination based on your soil structure that you have a high LBC soil or a low LBC soil, this can tell you about how much lime you need to apply. Now, because none of us out in the field really have the ability to determine our soil's lime buffering capacity, by using a simple chart like this, we can probably just gather the middle of the road. Your lime buffering capacity is going to be your soil's ability to resist pH change. So for instance, in this one, we can see if we have a low lime buffering capacity soil, if we need to move the pH from a 5 to a 7, we may need only 2,000 pounds per acre of lime. However, if we have a high lime buffering capacity soil, we may need upwards of 3,600 pounds or more to move our soil pH closer to a 7. So if you don't know where you are, if you do not have the buffer pH of your soil, if you do not know the lime buffering capacity, it would probably be safe to operate in a middle zone. And by using this chart here, we can see that to move it from a 5 to a 7 would be somewhere between 2,400 pounds of lime per acre to 4,000 pounds of lime per acre. So depending on which way you want to go, you could choose somewhere in the middle of those two values. So then the question becomes, which lime do I use? Like I said before, make the determination between magnesium carbonate and calcium carbonate, or dolomitic versus calcitic lime, based on what your magnesium and calcium levels are currently in your soil according to your soil test. Then the next step that you want to look at when you pick is the lime label. And specifically here, what we're going to look at is the percent of material that falls through a certain mesh sieve. And what this is going to tell us is the size of the grind before the lime is pelletized. As a general rule of thumb, the finer the grind, the faster it reacts in the soil. Remember, soil pH is determined by the concentration of hydrogen ions in the soil. The more hydrogen ions you have in the soil, the lower your pH, the more acidic you are, the more buffering material you will require to bring it back up. And the buffering material required to bring it back up would be a carbonate. Now, if we take a look at this chart shows us that the finer the grind specifically, we see just how fast the reaction time is. If you're going with a very, very large particle size prior to agglomeration, it's a very, very slow, if any kind of reaction at all. So we've made the determination we need to go with a fine size. And specifically, according to this chart, we know we need to be 50 mesh or smaller. So when we look at our mesh sieves, like on this label right here, we see that 65% or more fell through a 50 mesh, 60% fell through a 60 mesh, and 50% fell through a 100 mesh. So roughly 65% of this material can work quickly as it is watered into your soil. This is just a very standard high yield agricultural limestone. Now, we're gonna look at this product right here by Bonide. As we can see here, on the label, we will notice something that says the calcium carbonate equivalent, or the CCE value, and it's at 131%. That means this has a higher capacity, a higher liming power to be able to neutralize hydrogen in the soil, because it's over 100% of a calcium carbonate equivalent. Then we look at the particle size here. 92% of this material passes through a 325 mesh. That is an extremely fine material. Then, because of the fact that it is so high on the calcium carbonate equivalent scale, that means a product like this would be extremely effective at low rates, and if you wanted the duration out of it, you could move into higher rates and get more power out of it than you could at an even higher rate of a traditional or enhanced lime. Okay, now the next two we'll talk about will be like a Solucal or a Vertical from AquaAid. And if we look on this material here, we have 90% of this lime can pass through a 200 mesh. So that tells us that this will be a very, very fast acting lime. It also has a couple of different enhancements to it. Specifically here, we see some bacillus strains added in an attempt to stimulate microbiology in the soil. Now, by choosing to go out with a product like this, the reason we get the speed out of this material is because of the size of the grind. Now, that is not to be confused that you need less material. Because you have a certain concentration of hydrogen ions in the soil, you still require the same amount of liming material to have an extended effect. When a soil test will give you an option on how long it can remediate or correct your soil pH, it's all determined based on how many of those hydrogen ions can be buffered out, can be reacted out with the carbonates. So by going with a lime like this that it says it's going to cover 10,000 square feet, Yes, you can apply it to cover 10,000 square feet, but the length of time it's actually going to buffer your soil pH is going to be very low, because eventually the concentration of hydrogen ions will exceed the liming capacity of this material, because you only applied 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet, where your soil test may have indicated you needed to apply 46 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So you're only going to get about a quarter or 20% of the long-term performance out of a product like this if you were to apply it at 10,000 square feet. Now, this will temporarily move your pH very aggressively. However, it will only be temporary because, again, there's not enough buffering material available. And we look at this product from Vertical here. We see we have 90% again falling through a 200 mesh sieve. So same speed that we would get out of the other enhanced lime like Solucal. The difference here is that this actually contains a carboxylic acid. This one is a trihydroxycarboxylic acid. That's a very fancy name for basically saying that it contains something that will act as a polymer in the soil, meaning there might be some flocculation effect out of it. So when we talk about flocculation, the ability to aggregate soil particles, calcium carbonate in general, calcium in general is a good flocculator. So this adds one to it. Now, the other benefit of it would be its ability to retain moisture. The fastest way to get the lime to react in the soil is through the presence of moisture. So not only do you have the size grind, but if you can hold moisture at the lime for a longer period of time, the faster it will work. And that's going to be the premise behind how these enhanced limes work. They hold moisture at the source of the lime, and they have a very fine size grind. The rate that's specified on the bag is only for a temporary effect. If you want a long-term effect, you have to make the determination what the lime buffering capacity of your soil is and apply the rate of lime that's needed for that lime buffering capacity. Anything less than that means less long-term performance. So I hope you learned something from this video today. Lime is not that complicated, but just because you see something on the bag, understand that there is always more to the story. So it's important that we understand the chemistry behind manipulating soil pH so we can make the correct determination. Generally speaking, the better performing limes are going to be more expensive. That's just how it works. So don't be shocked, don't be afraid when you see a bag of lime that costs $14, $15, $16, because it has to go through a very intensive manufacturing process to get that material from what comes as limestone from the earth, ground up into a very, very fine particle size, and then re-agglomerated. That's an energy intensive step, and that's a very difficult and hard on equipment type of steps involved in producing the kind of lime you're looking for to give you both speed and duration. So thank you for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I hope you learned something. Y'all have a good one. Did y'all have fun?
Yeah.
Did you learn something today?
About that.
Did you learn anything about buffering the pH in the soil?
What does buffering mean?
I don't think so.